is our guest. He has a new book out, and we have a new nominee to the United States Supreme Court. And those two mesh perfectly. Senator?
Michael, great to be with you.
Your thoughts on Amy Coney Barrett as the nominee?
I think Judge Barrett is a very strong nominee. She is exceptionally well qualified. She graduated first in her class from Notre Dame Law School. She was a law clerk to the great Justice Antonin Scalia. She spent 20 years as a law professor teaching constitutional law at Notre Dame Law School, and she's one of the most respected federal appellate judges in the country. I think she's a very strong nominee, and I am confident the Senate will take up and confirm her nomination before Election Day.
The importance of that seat, or any of the 9 Supreme Court seats individually, is the subject of your new book, One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. What do you want people to know there?
Well, I wrote this book this spring and summer during the COVID lockdown, and it's actually coming out this week right now. The book focuses on the stakes at the Supreme Court and just how fundamentally important to all of us what happens at the court is. And the book is structured, each chapter addresses a different constitutional liberty. So there's a chapter on free speech. There's a chapter on religious liberty. There's a chapter on the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. There's a chapter on U.S. sovereignty. There's a chapter on elections and democracy, and in particular Bush versus Gore, which was the last big challenge to a presidential election, and I was part of the legal team that litigated that case and won that case. And what I do in each of the chapters is tell war stories, really try to bring folks behind the curtain to what went on in some of the biggest landmark cases before the court, many of which I've been fortunate to be able to litigate. You know, as you know, before I was in the Senate, my career was as a Supreme Court litigator, arguing cases before the court, and the book is designed to help you understand what's really at stake. Why does this matter for me? And what's stunning about chapter after chapter after chapter is every one of our fundamental rights is hanging by a single vote. It's 5-4, and one more left-wing activist on the court, and we could see the core rights from the Bill of Rights that we value so highly taken away from us.
Senator Lindsey Graham over the weekend laying out the timeline, according to him, for this nomination. I'm sure this is all y'all are talking about, but he says the process will begin October 12th, at least the public process. Do you expect a vote before Election Day?
I do, and I'm confident that the timing that Lindsey has set out, the Judiciary Committee hearing will start on the 12th. That timing enables the committee to vote her out and get her nomination to the floor in time for her to be confirmed at the end of the month. And I think it's critically important that we complete this process before Election Day. And the reason is there is a very high possibility that this election is going to be challenged and there's going to be litigation. Joe Biden has already made explicit that if he doesn't win on Election Day, he intends to challenge the legitimacy of the election. Hillary Clinton told him that under no circumstances, no matter what, should Joe Biden concede. And in the book, One Vote Away, I talk about Bush versus Gore, where we had a very close election. George W. Bush won on Election Day. He had the most votes. But Al Gore's legal team brought a whole series of lawsuits in the state of Florida trying to count and recount and recount and recount the votes to see if they could flip the totals and essentially steal the presidency. And we battled for 36 days. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court twice, prevailed both times at the court. The first time unanimously, the second time it was 5-4 to end the battle and to say enough is enough is enough. Bush has won every time we've counted the votes, and we're not going to drag this on forever. if we don't fill this vacancy, if there were only 8 justices on the court, if the court divides 4-4, if it's evenly divided, the court can't decide anything. A 4-4 court has no legal authority to decide anything. And in this instance, I think it could be much, much worse than Bush versus Gore. I think the Biden team could file lawsuits in 3, 4, 5 different states all over the country, all trying to flip the results of the presidential election. And if the Supreme Court can't rule, we could have conflicting rulings from courts of appeals all over the country and no way to resolve those rulings. And so that would pose a constitutional crisis. It would be chaos. It could let the election drag on for weeks and months. And so I think we owe it to the American people to ensure that there is a full 9-justice court that is ready by Election Day to resolve any proceeding, not for one candidate or the other, but to resolve a proceeding to ensure that the law is followed and the Constitution's followed.
Senator Ted Cruz is our guest. I was supportive of the John Roberts nomination. I thought he would go on to be a great Supreme Court justice. And even though we don't want an even number of 8, we want the full contingent of 9. How disappointed are you that what should be a 5-3 court is being talked about as a 4-4 court? And to what extent is that simply him trying to get back at Trump?
Well, I'm incredibly disappointed with John Roberts. As you know, I've known John for nearly 25 years. He was a law clerk for Chief Justice Rehnquist, as was I. He's older than I am. But we've known each other since I was a very young lawyer. And in fact, we were just talking about Bush versus Gore. I describe in the book, One Vote Away, how during Bush versus Gore, a number of the senior lawyers who were on the George W. Bush team, I personally called and asked them to come down and participate in it. John was one of them. I called John. He was practicing law at a law firm in D.C. He was at the time probably the top Supreme Court litigator in the country. And John dropped everything, came down, and played an integral part in the recount team. And in fact, one story I tell about, we're down in Tallahassee at the headquarters. We've got litigation going all over the state. It's chaos. And John, I think it was a Tuesday afternoon, is walking out carrying a suitcase. And I stopped him. I said, John, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm going back to D.C. And I said, John, how can you do that? We're in the middle of the biggest fight in the country for the presidency. And he somewhat sheepishly admitted, he said, well, I've got a U.S. Supreme Court argument tomorrow morning. And he flew to D.C. He argued a very complicated intellectual property case the next morning. He won 9-0 and then immediately dived back into being part of the legal team. He's a fabulously talented lawyer. Unfortunately, as a justice, I think he hates Donald Trump, and his rulings this past term have been terrible, and it's why I devoted an entire chapter of the book to how to get this right and pick justices who will be faithful. I'd encourage folks, go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, go to onevoteaway.com and order the book right now. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Senator Ted Cruz is our guest. Senator, I'm curious, you've written this book, One Vote Away, how a single Supreme Court seat can change history. What is your writing process? Are you a pen and paper guy? Do you bang it out on the keys? Do you dictate? What do you do?
You know, I worked with a young lawyer and writer, a fellow named Josh Hammers, very talented. He was a law clerk for Judge Jim Ho, and is a very talented young lawyer. And he and we would get on the phone, and he would record the conversations, and I would essentially dictate each chapter. I just sort of pace up and down my living room and dictate a chapter. It'd take an hour or two to dictate a chapter where I'd tell the inside war stories. What was really going on in Bush versus Gore? What was really going on in Heller versus District of Columbia, the big Second Amendment case that I represented 31 states in? And so I'd tell the war stories and analyze it. He would transcribe what I had dictated, and then Josh would edit it and clean it up a little bit, and he's very talented, and so he improved the text. He would then send it back to me, and then starting from that that text, I would then edit it pretty vigorously and go back and forth. And sometimes I'd ask him, hey, go research this or go research that. So there'd sort of be follow-ups, but we'd basically go back and forth, and that's where the text came from.
Okay. I'm always interested in people's writing process because everyone writes differently. And Rush Limbaugh, after his second book, said he wouldn't write another one because he doesn't have an iron butt. The concept of just sitting and writing in that way was exhausting to him. I don't know how you do it because it's not like you had any time off during all of this, and it's emotionally exhausting, mentally exhausting to do this. But it sounds like it's the sort of thing that you actually enjoy doing.
I enjoy it a lot. I mean, it's fun. This is my second book, and I really enjoyed writing both of them. And I actually use the same process. It's actually a lot of the process I used for writing Supreme Court briefs when I was litigating cases before the court, where I would work with a lawyer on the team, and we'd brainstorm ideas and get a draft on paper, and then I very vigorously edit the draft. And I like the process of my first book, A Time for Truth. We did the same thing. I worked with a team, and we just recorded, and I would tell stories. I mean, people communicate. You're an amazing storyteller, Michael, but it's how human beings communicate and connect, and then they would take the stories I would tell them and sort of clean them up and condense them a little bit and make them a little bit tighter, and then produce that draft for me, which I could then edit from.
When you look at this court, the composition of this court now, and of course the loss of Antonin Scalia a few years ago, Justice Thomas, in my mind, the beacon on this court. Who do you look to on this court that you say that person is serving the republic well?
Well, Justice Thomas is extraordinary. He is one of the greatest justices who's ever lived, and he's someone who I know very, very well. Justice Alito is extraordinary. Those are the two that are head and shoulders above everyone else on the current court. And the book One Vote Away, it starts with the death of Justice Scalia. And Justice Scalia died in February of 2016, and actually that day I was in South Carolina. I was right in the middle of the presidential campaign, and I was with my debate prep team. We were getting ready for a debate. The debate in South Carolina was that evening, and so we're huddled in this glass conference room. We're preparing for the debate, and my body guy, Bruce, who you've met, Bruce comes in, and he says, "Hey, have you heard about the thing?" And we're like, "What thing?" And he goes, "The Scalia thing." We're like, "What Scalia thing?" He said, "Well, he died." And we're going, "What?" And it turned out the sheriff in West Texas, where Justice Scalia had died, had just found his body. And the sheriff called me, and he called John Cornyn to inform us. And this was before the news was public. And so we spent the next couple of hours, reeling with the news, but also laying out a strategy for how to deal with it. And so as soon as the news went public, I called on the Senate not to take up any vacancy, but rather to let the voters decide. And the reason for that is Obama was a Democrat, was going to nominate liberal judicial activists, and the American people had elected a Republican majority in the Senate to stop liberal judicial activists. And as I describe in the book One Vote Away, when I called for it, we ended up seeing other Republican senators calling for it shortly thereafter, including Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and including Mitch McConnell. And it's very interesting. Mitch's former chief of staff said one of the reasons he came out loudly and early for not filling the vacancy is that he knew that evening at the debate in South Carolina that I would call for not filling the vacancy. He knew I'd call for it from the stage. And Mitch's former chief of staff said that Mitch did not want to be seen as following my lead, so he decided to do it anyway so that he didn't have to respond to what I said that night. And my attitude is great, fantastic. If we're doing the right thing, I don't care whose fault it is. It's the right thing to be doing.
I agree. One Vote Away. how a single Supreme Court seat can change history. Your favorite all-time Supreme Court justice, would it be Scalia?
Scalia I revere, but I have to say I have a special place in my heart for Chief Justice Rehnquist. This book is actually dedicated to Chief Justice Rehnquist. He was my friend. He was my boss. He was my mentor. He was the 16th Chief Justice of the United States, and he was really an extraordinary man. Born in Milwaukee, humble Midwesterner, staggeringly brilliant, deeply conservative. And when he was first put on the court by Richard Nixon in 1971, he was the Scalia before Scalia was there. He was the firebrand dissenter. In fact, his nickname was the Lone Ranger, because you had all of these left-wing decisions from the Earl Warren Court, and Rehnquist was just dissent, alone, over and over again, 8-1, 8-1, 8-1. And then in 86, Ronald Reagan made him Chief Justice. And it's an amazing and beautiful arc of constitutional history that you can go back and trace those old Rehnquist dissents from the 1970s and 80s, and on issue after issue, from religious liberty to federalism, the arc to separation of powers, the arc from Rehnquist dissent to majority opinion from the Rehnquist court is powerful, and he, by any measure, was one of the 2 or 3 most influential justices ever to serve on the court, and he was just a remarkable man, and as I said, a very close friend and mentor.
I have 1 minute and 5 questions, so I'm going to ask for quick answers. Will the book be on tape?
Yes, the book is on tape, and you can get it on Amazon or anywhere else.
Too late. Okay, Ramon wanted to narrate it. Do you binge watch any TV shows, and if so, what?
I just finished watching second season of Umbrella Academy. I binge watch all sorts of things on my iPad.
Do you drink pumpkin spice latte?
No, I just have coffee with cream.
Tacos, soft shell or hard shell?
Soft shell.
Fajitas, chicken or beef?
Beef.
You got 1 meal left in Houston, Texas to eat Tex-Mex. Where do you go?
Oh, Tex-Mex, Originals, Ninfa's on navigation.
You got 1 meal left to eat a burger in Houston, Texas. Where do you go?
You know where Heidi and I have been going lately is Hop Daddy.
The one in Highland Village?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Good burgers.
Burger and a beer. Tell your lovely bride hello. Love to the kids. Talk to you soon. Senator Ted Cruz.